Hello, everybody, and welcome to class. Today, we are at what has become a very, very famous monastery. A monastery that is Buddhist, belonging to the Chan tradition of Chinese Buddhism. Chan is a school that emphasizes meditation, training the mind via different techniques of watching and stilling the breath, for example. Chan also emphasizes mindfulness of what one does with one's body, speech, and mind. These concepts of mindfulness and meditation will fuse with traditions of combat, with the martial arts throughout the history of the Shaolin Temple. Let's take a little bit look at today's modern day Shaolin Temple. Then we'll learn a little bit more about the history of this particular monastery. The monastery supposedly dates back to the 5th, probably more likely the 6th century Common Era. And here's a look at the monastery today.
This is the Shaolin Temple in Hunan Province, China. With a history stretching back more than 1,500 years, the Shaolin Temple monks have developed their own unique style of Kung Fu, known as Shaolin Kung Fu. Located on Song Mountain in eastern China, the temple and surrounding buildings have become a sought-after tourist attraction. Within the temple complex, centuries of practice by warrior monks has left the floor sunken in the Thousand Buddha Hall. The surrounding area of Dongfang was named as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2010 and offers a wide range of historical and natural activities.
All right, and we'll return to the Shaolin Temple throughout this lecture. All right, and the Shaolin Temple, let's take a look. So the Shaolin Temple is a Buddhist monastery located in Henan, China. And you can see the map here. This is roughly the area that in modern day China where we can find it. The monks are known for their fighting arts. So we're going to briefly look at the history of how that came about. And this is a Buddhist temple that's also a very popular tourist destination. Why? Why is it a popular tourist destination? Well, we'll take a look at that also. Well, it was first popularized in 1982. So this temple was relatively unknown to the world, and the famed Shaolin monks were relatively unknown until 1982. A film starring action martial arts actor Jet Li had popularized. And this was the film Shaolin. Let's take a little closer look here at the film Shaolin. We're going to take a little bit of brief preview of the film. And this is the 1982 trailer. I apologize for the film quality. It's 1982 quality. Let's take a look. And this is actor Jet Li.
天下功夫出少林，各位觀眾，有關少林寺嘅電影，你可能睇過好多，但係啊，你知唔知道少林寺喺邊處呢？少林始祖達摩啊，喺邊一度面壁9年呢？你知唔知道少林寺和尚 點樣練功？喺邊處練功呢？少林寺和尚啊，點解可以飲酒食肉呢？擁有100萬門徒嘅日本少林寺拳法創始人中道神啊，點樣喺中國少林寺學到少林拳法？中原電影公司創業巨獻，動用千軍萬馬，馳騁中原，喺中國武林聖地嵩山少林寺實地拍攝一部正宗少林功夫電影《少林寺》。少林寺，一部從來未公開過嘅少林秘笈，一個從來未拍攝過嘅傳奇故事。少林寺特別邀請連獲5屆全中國武術比賽全能冠軍李連杰主演，刀馬明旦丁蘭，螳螂拳一代宗師于海，雙手劍創始人于成慧。1981年全國武術邀請賽5項冠軍胡堅強，成標冠軍劉懷良，九節鞭冠軍杜全陽，追軍名家孫建輝。其數十位中國武術精英，日本少林寺拳法7段高手聯合演出，不靠電影特技，唔係諧趣打鬥，全部真功夫，令你大開眼界。少林寺耗資千萬，場面偉大，正宗少林功夫前所未見。少林名勝古蹟，唯我獨有。少林寺。
All right. So I grew up watching films like that, and that particular film, Shaolin Temple, I believe it's actually available on YouTube to see for free. So if you were to Google Jet Li Shaolin Temple, you'd be able to access that particular film. All right, let's take a look more. I know I don't know if it has English subtitles, but you can just watch the action if it doesn't. Let's go now to the Shaolin Temple. The main figure associated with the Shaolin tradition is supposedly a individual. We don't know if this person actually existed or not, but is traced back to the 5th or 6th century. This is Bodhidharma or Damo. He's supposedly the founder of the older Shaolin arts, according to the stories. Bodhidharma was, according to legend, an Indian monk who brought Buddhism. So remember, Buddhism is a foreign religion that finds its way to China and Japan. Bodhidharma is associated with bringing this particular tradition of Buddhism, the Chan Buddhism, which becomes Zen in Japan. He's the figure that brings this to this area. And supposedly he noticed how the monks at the Shaolin Temple, when they were trying to meditate, they were always falling asleep. So he figured maybe if these monks, they needed some exercise, some training for their body. And supposedly this is the origin of the ancient martial movements. And stories, according to the legend, the Shaolin Temple is where Bodhidharma supposedly passed away on his route back to India. But this great meditation master, he had every intention of returning to India. So according to the story, he was resurrected and he somehow departs back to India. And how do they know this? Supposedly individuals encountered this very peculiar monk, this great master, but he was only carrying one shoe. And he called himself Bodhidharma. Well, when the emperor around the area of the Shaolin Temple found this out, he immediately ordered the tomb of Bodhidharma to be excavated. And when they did, supposedly according to legend, they didn't find Bodhidharma there. Well, what do they find? Well, they find the other shoe, Bodhidharma's second shoe. So the one-shoed Buddhist master Bodhidharma, or Dhammo in China. So Shaolin Buddhism is Shan Buddhism is associated with training the mind. I think our graphic is a little bit obscuring the image. Sorry about that. But Chan Buddhism is associated with training the mind via meditation to awaken one's Buddha nature. In the Chan tradition, as it'll be the case when Chan goes to Japan and starts to develop into the Zen tradition, there is a belief that underlining all the chatter that we have in our heads, all the different distractions that we face, the mind has this innate pure nature. And that innate nature is the mind of a fully enlightened, awakened being. And through meditation, according to Chan, especially under the direction of a qualified master, such as Bodhidharma or someone else, under the direction of a qualified master, the mind can go from being this mind that's distracted, that's wavering, that's anxious about this, worried about that. Through meditation, one can arrive at the original nature of this pure, calm, peaceful mind that is the Buddha mind. So Shaolin Buddhism is sometimes called Wuchan or martial meditation, and this is featuring physical exercises to cultivate spiritual awareness. At least this is how the tradition has described itself in different sources that you read about in this week's reading. There's also an emphasis that the body practices, and over time, Shaolin, some of the techniques we find most likely will, and the different meditations and different postures likely represent a coming together, a dialogue of Buddhism and Taoism. Buddhist, particularly Buddhist and Taoist notions of this inner life force, this inner chi. The Shaolin Buddhism is also associated with warrior traditions, and what we have evidence of, the ancient monks going back to the Qing and Ming dynasty, these were monks for hire, and they would side sometimes with certain rulers over others during civil wars. They would be rewarded with donations of land and so forth. And during periods when other Buddhist monasteries were in decline or perhaps were not receiving the patronage, the support of the emperors, the Shaolin still managed to survive because they had a reputation of being willing to take up arms and willing to engage in combat for the ruling elite. Over time, especially towards the modern period of China, the Shaolin become kind of feared as potential monks who will rebel against the modern nation state. And for a brief period, I can't remember how long the period was, but the temple was actually closed off by the government and went to a period of decline until the restrictions were lifted, and the temple becomes popular again, largely through the film that we saw a preview of in 1982. And since then, tourists have flocked to the Shaolin Temple. Individuals from all over the world, such as in the documentary you've been viewing, they'll come to the Shaolin Temple hoping to study really the martial arts aspect, although some of them might also be interested in Chan Buddhism. Okay, and going back to the big kind of theme of the class is that we're arguing that really to understand the development of Chinese religions, we have to look at these different dynastic periods. And it's going to be kind of towards these later dynasties, although we think that the temple does develop around the Tang dynasty, sometime around the 6th or 7th century. Under the Ming and Qing dynasties, it'll go through its height as these dynasties, particularly the Ming, will patronize the temples. So Shaolin Buddhism in the Ming and Qing eras, monks are praised and paid for services to dynastic rulers. So the monks will engage in combat. Sometimes they'll fight off bandits who are trying to attack their estate. At other times, they may come to the aid of a ruler in distress or side with this particular faction during a civil war. So the martial exploits, they're found, the martial exploits of famous monks, they're found, they're praised in imperial records of the Qing and Ming era, and they're inscribed often in the place of a burial of a given monk, a monk who is known for heroic combat or being a fierce warrior. Their place of burial, this is called a stupa. A stupa is these are places where the remains of great Buddhist masters are preserved, and they find this all throughout the Buddhist world of Asia. On these stupas, sometimes we'd find inscriptions describing the martial and the warrior prowess of a given monk. Also key to understanding the Shaolin are particular deities that are often depicted as warrior monks. So Buddhism enters as a non-violent religion. At least that's very big on how Buddhism will brand itself, as taking the moral high ground, as showing compassion. And for the monks and nuns, the community that we call the Sangha, as having this very strong, extreme discipline. If the Shaolin monks were known for eating meat and drinking alcohol, supposedly this was part of the tradition of developing their inner power, their inner chi, that they could harness in defense of the land and defense of the empire, but also supposedly to defend Buddhism against foreign attackers or threats within, to protect the monastery, to protect the scriptures, to protect the community of monks. And we start to see inscribed in the temples, and we saw some of those in the opening video, the use of imagery and Buddhist figures of the past to claim a martial history. In particular, we see, for example, these enlightened beings surrounding the Buddha. But and these are figures that you find artistically depicted all throughout Asia, in places such as, Japan, China, India, Tibet. In the context of the Shaolin temples, these figures were artistically, they may have held a holy scripture, a thunderbolt, some kind of popular Buddhist image. Often the objects that they're holding is replaced by a staff, and that's because the Shaolin, although we often see images of them with their hand-to-hand combats, they have a strong history associated with being bearers of the staff. So staff fighting and staff wielding. In particular, the Buddhist patron deity of the Shaolin monastery is a figure named Vajrapani. Vajra means this is like a thunderbolt, and Pani means hand, so having a thunderbolt in one's hand. In the Shaolin temples, the thunderbolts, often symbolized by an object called a Vajra, is replaced by a staff, and Vajrapani becomes a staff wielder. So let's briefly take a look at Vajrapani. So again, this is the patron saint of the Shaolin. He's a Buddhist protector deity imported from India, and this was supposedly a bodyguard for Siddhartha Gautama, the individual we learned about a few weeks back who becomes the Buddha. So this is the bodyguard imported into China and becoming fused with the East Asians' artistic style and associated with the staff-wielding tradition of the Shaolin. This figure symbolizes the Buddha's power and energy, and is accessible through esoteric. So esoteric means often secretive meditations and rituals. In the Chinese context, Vajrapani becomes a manifestation of Kuan Yin, who we learned about a few weeks ago, the Bodhisattva of compassion. And of course, in this reminder, in the Shaolin tradition, he's given a staff associated with our staff fighting monks. All right, well, this will conclude our couple weeks that we've been doing on Chinese Buddhism. Remembering that, whereas last week we looked at more at Pure Land Buddhism, this week as we visit the Shaolin monasteries, we're entering the world of Chan Buddhism, a world that emphasizes, whereas Pure Land will emphasize more prayers and rituals to presiding deity of a Buddhist Pure Land, such as Amitabha, who we met last week. The Chan tradition, for the most part, will emphasize more inner practices of meditation and cultivating the mind. In the case of the Shaolin, these traditions of cultivating and purifying the mind through meditation, through discipline, through studying under a guru, will fuse with traditions of combat. And it'll be and they'll use this combat to serve different ruling powers, who will in turn protect the monastery and support the monastery. We saw that to emphasize that this is not just violence, this is something that's Buddhist. There's artistic depictions of figures such as Vajrapani depicted throughout the monastery, often associated with the specialization of the Shaolin, which was staff fighting. And following the popularization of the film by Jet Li, Jet Li's been on a lot of films. I was a pretty big fan of his. I haven't watched any of his stuff in a while. So, but anyway, Jet Li's 1982 film, The Shaolin Temple, the monastery becomes more and more known throughout the world, and we'll start to see an increase of tourists and students hoping to study the martial arts. All right, well, that will conclude our lecture for today. And so stay safe, stay well, and stay tuned.